You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. It's great to be here with you today. Excited to get into today's Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday topic, where we are going to be chatting about these 7 warning signs of chronic inflammation. So most of us have heard about inflammation by now. Those of you that haven't, we'll go over what it is. But what I want to talk about is this, is that a lot of people are overlooking conditions in their life and blaming it on genetics, blaming it on even a lack of sleep, whatever it might be, and not understanding that there are real implications to these nagging symptoms that begin to add up over time. You know, you might brush it aside for a couple days or a couple weeks or a couple months, but after a while, it will catch up. And when it catches up, that is when we get labeled with the disease process. So what I want to go over here today is what to look for before it begins to become a real overt disease that then your physician's going to prescribe medication, or you're going to become chronically sick, chronically ill. Now, again, all of that can still be fixed, but better to find the warning signs now, better to look for them. And also, again, it's not always just about you is what I want to make this a show about. It's about understanding the basic and foundational medical concepts, natural medical concepts that you can then share with friends, family, coworkers, and I always say, just invite them into the conversation. It's their choice whether they decide to take that next step forward or whether they just kind of brush it aside. But again, even if they brush it aside now, the message is in their mind and they can say, okay, I'm not ready to hear it yet, but when I am, this person is the person that I should go to for more information. And, you know, my family, myself, I've seen this many, many times in my life where I might just kind of drop a hint like, hey, there's another alternative to what you're doing right now. If I feel like it's my place to say that, I'll say that. And people are like, oh, okay. And I can tell when they're interested in furthering the conversation or not. And if they're not, I'm certainly not going to push it on them for sure. But I open that up, and then I see people all the time, they get back in touch like, hey, remember when you were talking about this, and the other thing? And I say, sure. And they say, how can I go about learning more about that? And that's when the conversation has been opened up. I never try to force anything on anyone. One is because even if the answer is there for them, they're not willing and their mind is not open enough to take that information. So it's not even a point to give them that information. Here's why. They're not going to take any action on it. And furthermore, they can simply dismiss it and kind of bury the head back in the sand. Even if we know it's for the person's best interest, even if we know it's going to work, if they are not ready, it could certainly just upset them more than anything. So what I want to share today, though, is this is a podcast that I think a lot like yesterday with the 5 steps to simplifying your nutrition. It's a foundation, it's a place to get started, and it's a place of knowledge where once you get it, once you understand it, you're going to want to move forward. You really are, because again, these are signs that if you're not doing this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's not going to be good. So let's go over the first one. I've got 7 here for you today. The first one is this. A lot of people, when they're developing, and that's why this is part of the Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday show, and this is only one of the 7, but a lot of people, when they're developing body fat, namely around the belly, and it's stubborn, meaning that the fat around the middle, right around the belly button, and maybe a little bit above the hips on those love handles, it's more difficult to get rid of. And not only is it more difficult to get rid of, it seems like if you're able to lose it in other places but not around the midsection, it could be a real sure sign that there is excessive inflammation in the body. And inflammation is essentially caused by the immune system. And the immune system is reacting to something in the body. Now, we'll go over all what those somethings are for sure with each one of these, but what I want to go over them is one by one. I want to really kind of look at each one. And I've talked about this before, and that's why you do know that you can go to stevencabral.com/podcast for all of my previous shows. Yesterday would be a good place to start. So that was episode 1271. Today is episode 1272. Now, what you want to look at with belly fat is this. Now, if you're simply eating more processed carbs, well, that's a problem, right? So if you're eating a little bit more flour-based products, that means baked-based goods or sugary beverages, anything processed sugar, processed starch, not a good thing. So, of course, we want to stay away from those. Fruit juice as well. You can eat fruit, but not the fruit juice. So what I would like to say is this, is that if there's a reason why you've been gaining that belly fat, it's hard to get rid of, okay, well, you understand then where it's coming from. But what I want to say is, what about if you've been kind of doing the same thing and all of a sudden that belly fat's just a lot harder to get rid of? At that point, I want to look at blood sugar levels. Again, this is all based on the rain barrel effect. Everything that I'm talking about today is the rain barrel effect. That means you may have been able to get away with this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe for sure, but not today. And why is that? Well, over time, our bodies are not able to keep up with the demands of physical life. Now, can they? Absolutely. That you can catch back up. But what happens is we've kind of been relying on what we have always done. And the problem is that a little bit of entropy or a little bit of breakdown, catabolism starts to set in. And your buffers, namely your enzymes and amino acids and your vitamin C levels and your B vitamins, all of those things have been able to keep up with the methylation process of the body, detox process of the body, and the body's ability to balance inflammation. But over time, it's kind of like just if someone took one finger and just kind of poked you in the arm, not too hard at all, but they just kind of poked you in the arm, and they did that 5 times, no big deal, 10 times, no big deal, 100 times, it's kind of getting annoying. Picture that 10,000 times, 100,000 times. Think about how black and blue that area of your arm would be, how painful it would be to the touch. Well, they did the same thing they did the very first poke, or 5 pokes or 10 pokes, but over time, the damage is done. And that is how essentially the rain barrel effect, or how anything works in the body, is inflammation builds up over time. So what you used to be able to get away with 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you can't get away with today. And that's why I want to really look at this, because belly fat can be blood sugar dysregulation over time. Your body's not doing as well of balancing that. And so I'd love you to look up. I even did a whole podcast on how stress, blood sugar, belly fat all go together. And that was at stevencabral.com/BRMI. And that was just a video, about a half-hour video on how all of this works. So you can check that out. But I'll tell you right now, that belly fat that just won't seem to go away, it's a sure sign that inflammation is building up in the body. And I want you to just heed that. I want you to begin to look at blood sugar, insulin levels, as well as higher levels of cortisol and estrogen. All of that can be looked at with something called the thyroid adrenal hormone test, and that can be done right at home with a little bit of saliva and a couple drops of blood right from your fingertips. So that's a great one to do, and you can check that out as well. We'll link everything up at stevencabral.com/1272 today. All right, the second one is this, and I want to go over this because this is really important. Again, it hits home with me, is that fatigue over time can simply be from inflammation. And you might say, well, why is that? Well, here's why. Inflammation is caused by something. Remember, inflammation is never the root cause of any of these issues, but certainly they are warning signs. Now, your body can be worn down from dealing with viruses, such as any number of the herpes simplex viruses, okay? Really important to look at that, like cold sores over time, shingles over time, herpes zoster over time, Epstein-Barr virus, mono, all of these things that the body's always kind of knocking down, viruses in general, wear out the body. And they create inflammation because your white blood cells, and this is just one part of it, over time, picture it this way. If you're always fighting something, it's going to wear you out over time. That's the bottom line. So here's the thing. When you're looking at fatigue, it's very important that you're understanding that there is an inflammation component of it. For the longest time when I had Addison's disease, I didn't know why I was always relapsing every 3 months, 4 months. I would get better and then relapse, get better and then relapse. It's the same thing. Think of Addison's, myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is ME, CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. I would put fibromyalgia in there. You just have to understand is that your body, it's on the inside, you can't see it, but it's always fighting something. And I'm going to link that up with this next one too. So why don't I do that? And that's food sensitivities. So we have to look at fatigue as a greater effort within the body of fighting some type of inflammatory processing, and it can be food sensitivities, which is why I wanted to put this one in here today. So when I was dealing with all of my health-based issues, I had massive food sensitivities, and I'm going to even build this up with the next one as well. But my food sensitivities were to a lot of healthy foods. They honestly were. That's why people ask me all the time, like, should I do a 500 food sensitivity test? I'm just like, you know what? You could just do a 100 food panel. Like, we do a 94 food panel, and it's plenty. It really is. Because here's the thing. I tested positive for so many foods, dozens of foods. And when you test positive for that many foods, you can't eliminate every food under the sun. You really can't. You're just not able to. So what a lot of physicians or healthcare practitioners miss is that when you have a dozen food sensitivities, it means that your body has a larger amount of intestinal permeability. There's a lot of leaky gut. And what that means is that the cell wall, which is really a single cell wall, and you have 28 feet or so of digestive tract. Now, part of that includes your esophagus, your stomach, etc. But let's just say we look at the 26 feet or so of intestine, small intestine, large intestine. Well, it can become more permeable. And as it does that, it allows more proteins, normal proteins from your foods to seep out. But they seep out without being fully broken down. So they're no longer these single or smaller amino acid chains. That means when your body sees longer amino acid chains, which we would just call food proteins, it begins to react. And when it reacts with IgM cells and IgG cells, you don't need to know what those immunoglobulin or immune cells are, but it mounts an inflammatory process. And that inflammation could be around your belly, but it's typically over the whole body. So the inflammatory process is now over the whole body. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This is where your genetics matter. So I started to get signs of rheumatoid arthritis. I had joint pain, like my joints hurt. I had flu-like symptoms all the time. I would start to get other issues, which I'll talk about in just a moment because they're inflammatory symptoms. So do keep in mind, these are all signs of inflammation. But the larger issue was that I had leaky gut. I had inflammatory-based issues. And now, just now, again, medical science used to dismiss this all the time when I had this 20 plus years ago. But now, it's commonplace. It's more understood. Not so much in a lot of like PCPs, but for sure, natural medicine doctors and integrative health practitioners know that 90%, and I would say 100%, but at least 90% is proven, that all autoimmune issues have at least some, if not all, of their root cause in gut-based issues and increased intestinal permeability, which we just call leaky gut. So if we understand that autoimmune issues are inflammatory in nature, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, sarcoidosis, MS, you name it. If we know that autoimmune-based issues have their root cause in gut-based issues, why aren't we working on the gut? That's my biggest question. So if you're going to your endocrinologist for Hashimoto's and they're putting you on T4 medication or potentially T4 and T3 medication, but the real issue is this massive gut permeability and food sensitivities, why aren't we looking at that? It's interesting, right? Same with rheumatoid arthritis. If you're being put on biological drugs that literally shut down part of your immune system, which then could lead to mortality because of susceptibility to other illnesses because you shut down part of your immune system, why aren't we looking at gut-based issues? We help people with RA and psoriatic rheumatoid arthritis all the time, but yet we're looking at it from a totally different perspective, a non-disease perspective. Because remember, the disease is a collection of symptoms. And yes, it's given that for health insurance, so you medicate it. But what if there was something more to it? What if there really was a way out of it? What if there really was a way to reverse it? Well, that would save so many millions of people. And that's what we're trying to preach here today. Now, I've been talking a lot about food sensitivities in the gut as well, but gut-based inflammation, let's say that you're always dealing with constipation or loose stool or what? IBS, what does it stand for? Inflammatory bowel, right? Or IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. We've got a syndrome versus disease. One's longer than the other, right? One's chronic inflammation. One's shorter amounts of inflammation. So when we look at Crohn's, colitis, IBS, IBD, we're looking at inflammation as the center point. But what are they really caused by? Well, if you're someone that suffers from Crohn's and colitis, stress is a major part of it. And I would say IBS, IBD as well, because what are they? It just means irritable bowel. But here's the thing. It's stress in conjunction with candida overgrowth or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Sometimes parasites and sometimes H. pylori. And if you really hit the lottery, you'll have all four. Parasites, H. pylori, candida, and SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And a lot of people do, or at least 3 of the 4, which is what I had. So that is truly how I began to rebuild my body from the ground up. Didn't happen overnight, but I started and I realized, because again, I found this out myself. I ran the same labs that I share with people today. I found out that I had candida overgrowth. I had small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and I had H. pylori, which we didn't find for years later. Now we're giving people the ability to do that, and you can do it at home. 19 countries around the world. I mean, it's an amazing ability to be able to do this and share it with others. And that's the whole reason why I do this. It's not easy work. It's not easy to ship these labs to 19 countries around the world. But we want to do it because this is the way to figure out what a person has. So once I figured it out, now I didn't have the exact protocol back then. This is 15 years ago, right? So what I had to do was this. I had to work the protocols. I had to figure it out. By doing that, though, I was able to figure out how this works. So I got rid of my candida. I got rid of my SIBO. I got rid of my H. pylori, came back. I got rid of it again, and I realized, okay, this is how we get rid of it. So it's all of that, knowledge that has led me to where I am today, and I'm very thankful for that. I met many great practitioners. I did many great protocols, which has, again, enabled me to create what I've created today, the Candida bacterial overgrowth protocol. We have something for H. pylori. We have something for parasites. And it simply starts with this. We have a 4-part process. I talked about that, I believe, last week. But we're revealing what the issue is, and then we're removing whatever those issues are, candida, SIBO, parasites, H. pylori. And then what we're doing is we're replacing, right? We got to put the good stuff back in. And it's not just probiotics right away, but it is a specific way to do that. And then after that, it's regenerating and renewing the body. So that is what it's all about. And there's this process to this. And then again, you seal up the gut wall. Now, remember, if you seal up the gut wall, what happens? Well, if proteins and bacteria and yeast is no longer spewing literally into your bloodstream, which is right next to and connected to your intestines, well, now your immune system can calm down. Now, it takes weeks and months for it to calm down, but here's what. This is where we start to reverse the dis-ease of the body, and the body begins to become balanced again. And it's an amazing, amazing process how this happens. But inflammation is your sure sign. So if you have the bloating, the Crohn's, the colitis, the IBD, the IBS, those are all issues to be aware of. Another one that goes along with this is what about the psoriasis or eczema or itchy skin or hives? Any skin rash-based issue, a lot of the time has to do with the gut, but the skin itself is an inflammatory-based issue. So if you get contact and dermatitis from your environment, or you eat something and you get itchy, or you kind of always have like red rashy skin, or you have rosacea, think of it as an inflammatory-based process of those blood vessels or the dermal layer of the skin caused by oftentimes, not psoriasis, but the rest, eczema and hives and the itchy skin of a Th2 immune imbalance. This is chronic-based inflammation. Chronic-based inflammation is an exacerbation of the immune system due to either yeast overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, any type of issue that the body's been chronically fighting. And over time, what does it do? Well, it leads to a massive overreaction of the immune system. Again, the immune system is not doing anything improper. That's where we kind of get off. It's like we get off track because we don't really understand that this is what the immune system's supposed to be doing. If you always have leaky gut, if you always have candida overgrowth, well, your immune system's always on. But it's supposed to get a chance to rest, just like we are, right? It needs to rest. So here's the issue. We still need to find the underlying root cause, but for sure, if you have inflammatory skin issues, even I would say like dandruff, flaking scalp, all of those are really alopecia, are skin-based issues, but caused by deeper issues within. Yes, stress is part of it, but a lot of times it does go back to the gut. And I want people to begin to explore that, because if you never look at your body's ability to absorb minerals, to absorb vitamins and essential fatty acids, you can blame it on everything under the sun, but you have to start with food. But if your good food that you're eating can't be absorbed, then what do? Right? We're always saying start with food, and I agree. But if you can't absorb it because your gut is imbalanced, well, you can eat all the good food in the world that you want, but it's not able to be absorbed, which is why I've seen such great results with supplements. Why? Because they're already in their pre-absorbed state. You don't need to break them down. But it doesn't mean that you should be on higher dosage of supplements for the rest of your life. What it means is you should use supplements in conjunction with whole food for the first 3 to 6 months, and then you can wean down your supplements and continue with the whole food as your digestive system's been rebuilt. This is why people say, oh no, you should only be using this, this, and this. Remember, that it's nice to live in an ideal world. I want to live in that ideal world as well. But what I want, more importantly, is to help people from an unbiased perspective. So I'll use everything in my disposal to help someone. That's it. Because I'm not going to force them to fit in one small box, right? That's it. Like, oh no, you can only fix this by acupuncture. You can only fix this by chiropractic. You can only fix this by herbs. You can only fix this by juicing. No, we're going to fix it by everything. If we want to use acupuncture, great. Same with chiropractic, same with whole foods, same with whatever you want. Whatever is best for the person is what we should be using. And oftentimes it's multiple things, not just one thing. Okay, let me get back on track. Another one that I want to bring to your attention is headaches and migraines. We see people all the time with headaches and migraines. But headaches and migraines, like there's not typically, we would say like a thumbtack in the head, right? Just like a thumbtack in the foot. That's what's not causing the head to hurt. What's causing the head to hurt is either biomechanical subluxations of the spine in the cervical vertebrae. That means that you have some type of improper alignment in the neck from keeping your head tilted forward too far because of your iPhone or desk set up all day, or it is weak posterior chain muscles, which are like the back of the shoulders, or it's too much blood flow or too little blood flow up through the neck to the head. It could be the food sensitivities for sure. It could be going back to your hives and your itchy skin. It could be too much cytokines or too many histamines, right? I did a show last week on amines, right? The low amine diet and what that means. But again, it goes back to the gut. It's being chronically inflamed. But this inflammation, based on your genetics, it could be rheumatoid arthritis, could be Hashimoto's, could be sarcoidosis, could be MS, it could be headaches, it could be migraines. That's why genetics matter, but they don't matter to the root cause, right? Genetics show you your susceptibility. That's it. It shows you your susceptibility, but it doesn't mean that you need to live with it. It means you can turn it on and off based on how full your rain barrel is. That's why we need to empty our rain barrel. It's all about emptying the rain barrel. It really is. It's going back to functional medicine detox. It's going back to the removal of candida and SIBO and H. pylori and parasites, removing the heavy metals, removing the thumbtack in the foot, or fixing the cervical vertebrae, getting back into doing proper postural alignment. All of those things do matter. Super, super important. So I think that, I really just want to make sure that people are understanding that all of these things are true. You absolutely do have them, but it doesn't mean that you need to live with them. And yes, they are inflammatory based. So when your doctor says, oh, it's inflammation based, we need to use this medication. It is inflammation based. I don't deny that. Inflammation exists. However, it's not a disease. And inflammation is not even something to really be treated. Treated in the short term using natural methods or pharmaceutical methods if you want, right? That's up to you. But what I'm saying is this. I want you to figure out what's causing the inflammation in the first place. And this last one is, near and dear to my heart as well. And that's depression, low mood, anxiety, panic attacks, etc. Now, there's absolutely acute forms of this. Let's say you lost your job, you have a sick parent, a sick child, a sick spouse, any of these things, right? That will lead to anxiety, and that's normal. I totally understand that. What I'm talking about is living with low mood, depression, seasonal affective disorder, any of these things for a long period of time. Part of it absolutely is mental emotional because there is trauma in life, and I'm not overlooking that nor denying that. But what I want us to look at too is that the physiology of the body has a lot to do with this. So your psychology, how you think, can absolutely affect your physiology. But your physiology, that means your level of B vitamins, vitamin C, everything, right? Your ability to make serotonin, ability to make dopamine, your ability to make norepinephrine, acetylcholine. All of those things are based on your nutrients as well. So your chemistry matters, which can change your brain chemistry. So I really don't want to overlook this. And that's why I'm not discounting counseling and therapy. Do that in conjunction with working with an integrative health practitioner. And the reason why I mention that is that because oftentimes, again, H. pylori or gut-based issues can lead to mood-based disorders. Low levels of B vitamins, as seen on an organic acids test, or low levels of vitamin C can lead to lower mood. If you're not methylating properly, well, you're going to possibly be lower mood. It really does. All of these things do add up. When I started adding in magnesium, zinc, vitamin C, and B6 and B12 as well, my mood dramatically elevated. I was less prone to a darker mood, a lower mood, seasonal affective disorder. Everything got much, much better, less OCD, all of those things. And I was overall much happier. Add exercise to that, I'm doing a whole lot better, right? So all of those things are important to look at because there are people that can have the same exact trauma in life. And some people seem to do okay with it and some don't. So there's multiple parts to this. And I don't want to say that depression is an easy thing to deal with. It's not. And I feel for anyone out there that's dealing with it right now. But I want to let you know that if I believe that there is the ability to heal from every condition, I agree. I believe that with depression as well. So what I want you to look at is the underlying root cause, and inflammation is absolutely predicated, or I should say implicated, with depression as well. So I don't want you to overlook that, right? Because sometimes we just say it's something I have to need to learn to live with. I don't love that phrase, you need to learn to live with it. I was told that by many of my doctors and specialists, some of the best in the world, right? When I was 17, 18 years old. Then I found something called natural medicine, right? And when I found that, then I was able to say, oh, there are multiple factors to this. And I'm going to use everything at my disposal. And that's what I want for you. So that's what today's show is dedicated to. I hope it was helpful. Remember, these are all things that people overlook, right? The fatigue, the headaches, the depression or low mood, the food intolerances, the digestive issues, the belly fat we start to gain, the skin issues, right? All of those do matter. They are signs of inflammation. Don't overlook them, because if you overlook them, they will get worse over time. They don't magically heal. But remember, you can fix all of these things. You can do at-home lab testing. You can run the Big Five, which are my absolute favorite labs out there right now. Everything's available at equilibriumnutrition.com. But keep in mind, you can also work with your local integrative health practitioner, your local functional medicine doctor, and get the help that you deserve. Remember, every day in the Cabral Concept, we talk more and more about these topics. So I do hope it was helpful. And as always, if this show was helpful, please do feel free to pass along to anyone you believe it could serve. Take care, everyone. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.